The second Constitution had just been ratified and George Washington was voted in unanimously. Twice, two main political groups were rising, the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans. Federalists strived for a big federal government with an industrialized economy and close ties to the United Kingdom, popular ideals in New England at the time. Meanwhile, the Democratic Republicans were popular in the South due to their agrarian and states' rights agenda. After 8 years of presidency, George Washington was expected to run for a third term but refused to, setting a tradition that would last for a century and allowing the Federalist and Democratic Republicans to nominate their own candidates. The Federalists dominated American politics all the way up to Thomas Jefferson, where they began to decline despite many controversial decisions by the Democratic Republicans, like the Embargo Act of 1807 that hurt New England merchants. It wasn't until 1812, during the midst of a war with Britain, that the Federalists had another shot. The war was extremely unpopular around the time of the election, and the Federalists capitalized off that by taking an anti-war approach. Unfortunately, they lost and fumbled massively afterwards, destroying the party's reputation, causing it to fade into irrelevance. The Democratic-Republican Party wouldn't last much longer as it fell apart around a decade later, 4 candidates from the party running for presidency, leading to no candidate getting an electoral majority, causing a contingent election that gave the presidency to John Quincy Adams. 1828 saw an entirely new two popular parties, the National Republicans and the Democrats. National Republicans and Democrats were both descendants of the Democratic-Republican Party and had similar views, the election being decided by the personalities of the two candidates. The next election was rather complicated, with 4 parties getting electoral votes, including 2 new ones, the Nullifiers and the Anti-Masonics. Nullifiers believed that states could nullify perceived unjust laws inside their territory. They were popular in South Carolina due to the unpopular tariff of 1828. Concurrently, Anti-Masons were single-issue anti-Masonic voters. In the following election, the National Republicans and Anti-Masons merged into the Whig Party. They were known for their want for a limited government and opposition to expansionist policies. The same election was also one of the first elections where slavery was a major topic, with most Whigs generally discouraging expansion of the practice, while Democrats fully supported it. Slavery continued to be a major topic over the next few years as major issues such as if Texas should be admitted as a slave state arise. 1856 saw the introduction of the two-party system as we know it today, when the Republican Party was founded, replacing the Whigs. Republicans were focused on preventing the expansion of slavery. This election cycle also saw the foundation of the American Party, commonly known as the Know-Nothings, who practiced nationalism and nativism. They would fade into irrelevance shortly thereafter. 1860 was the final election before the Civil War, in which tensions were extremely high, with 4 parties running: the Republicans, the Democrats, the Southern Democrats, and the Constitutional Unionists. Southern Democrats were a split off of the Democrat Party with similar ideals, while the Constitutional Union was made up of former Whigs from the South who did not want the South to succeed, but did not support Republicans or Democrats. The election was the straw that broke the camel's back, Abraham Lincoln winning without needing a single Southern state to vote for him. Following the Civil War, a radical reconstruction of the South began. A large Democrat talking point is they extremely disliked it, citing states' rights. Reconstruction ended in 1877 when, due to an extremely close election in 1876, Democrats denied the results, leading to a compromise being made that involved withdrawing the remaining federal troops from the South and ending Reconstruction. Over the next decade, tariffs, bimetallism, and the general economy became big issues. Republicans won most elections with their popular economic policies and support for civil rights. In 1892, James B. Weaver of the People's Party won multiple states with his agrarian populist policies. The People's Party would later fade into obscurity. The turn of the century brought the United States into the world stage after it won the Spanish-American War, bringing the question if the nation wanted to become an imperialist power. Republicans, who many were in support of imperialism, won the election. In the early 20th century, progressive issues such as civil rights, women's suffrage, and business regulation became voting topics. This culminated when Theodore Roosevelt, who failed to get the Republican nomination, made his own party, commonly referred to as the Bull Moose Party, or the Progressive Party. This party split the Republican vote in half, allowing for a landslide Democrat victory. The following election was overshadowed by turmoil in Europe. The American general public wanted to keep out of the war, and both sides promised that if they were elected. Woodrow Wilson won re-election and ended up joining the war anyways. During the next few elections, the economy increased substantially during the Roaring '20s under Republican presidents, before suddenly in 1929 the Great Depression hit the nation hard.
The tremendous crowds which you see gathered outside the stock exchange are due to the greatest crash in the history of the New York Stock Exchange.
Taking advantage of the situation in the nation, the Democratic Party and Franklin D. Roosevelt started pushing the New Deal, a plan to create massive public works and implement welfare. This changed the Democrat Party, causing it to shy away from its former conservative nature and instead push for regulation and liberalism. FDR's policies were extremely popular to the American public and allowed for an easy re-election. During this time, Republicans began major opposition to New Deal policies, preventing many from passing. In 1940, FDR was the first president to be re-elected for 3 terms, ending the tradition set by George Washington. 4 years later, he was re-elected once again before dying only months into office. After FDR, the new party affiliations were further cemented, with Republicans now campaigning for lower taxes, smaller government, and more aggressive foreign policy as the Cold War had just started. Meanwhile, Democrats were campaigning for bigger government, more regulation, and more welfare. In addition, during this year, the States' Rights Party, otherwise known as the Dixiecrats, won multiple southern states due to anger over the Democrat candidate's support for civil rights. The party supported segregation. During the 50s and 60s, foreign policy regarding anti-communism dominated the election cycle.
It's dawn, and Alpha Troop 19 is commuting to war.
1968 was during the midst of the deeply controversial Vietnam War. At the same time, the civil rights movement was at full force with the recent assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. In addition to that, another Southern segregationist party had popped up, the American Independent Party.
Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
1976 followed the Watergate scandal, which damaged the Republican Party significantly and brought about greater want for government transparency. Gerald Ford, the vice president of Nixon, attempted to portray himself as an experienced politician, while Jimmy Carter was seen as a reformer and outsider from the corrupt regime. Jimmy Carter narrowly won the election. Ronald Reagan vs. Walter Mondale is well known for its absolute landslide, with every state except Minnesota going to Reagan. This happened due to the extreme popularity of Reagan's Reaganomics. The next few elections mainly focused on foreign policy, economy, and crime. The election at the turn of the 21st century is famous for how close it was. George W. Bush won Florida by only 537 votes, resulting in a massive Supreme Court case. In 2004, Obama was well liked as people saw him as a figure for change and diversity, leading to an election and re-election. 4 years later, a rise in right-wing populism led to the election of Donald Trump. In the following election, partially due to failure to respond to the COVID pandemic, Trump lost the re-election to Joe Biden.